The Lady or the Tiger by Frank Stockton. In the very old days, there lived a king who was described as semi-barbaric. Half of his nature had been softened by civilization, but the other half was still wild and untamed. His ideas were grand, his methods were direct, and his will was absolute. He had taken some refined customs from the polished nations around him, but he wore these like a costume. Beneath the surface, his instincts remained fierce and uncompromising. This king had built a great arena at the center of his kingdom. It was a magnificent structure, an open amphitheater surrounded by galleries and towers. Here, the king staged what he believed was the most perfect system of justice ever devised. Whenever a citizen was accused of a serious crime, the king would summon the entire population to the arena. The accused would stand alone on the floor of the great amphitheater. Directly across from him were two identical doors, side by side. He had to choose one and open it. What came out, or who came out, was his fate, and his fate was the judgment of the gods. Behind one door waited a fierce, hungry tiger, the most savage beast the kingdom's hunters could find. If the accused opened that door, the tiger would leap upon him instantly, and the man would be torn apart before the crowd. There was no appeal. There was no escape. Behind the other door stood a woman, a beautiful, carefully selected lady. If the accused opened that door, he was immediately married to her, right there in the arena, before the entire assembled crowd. It did not matter if he was already married to someone else. Ceremony and celebration would follow. The audience would cheer, flowers would be thrown, and the joyful music would ring out. This was the king's justice. It was impartial, the king declared. The outcome was not decided by the judges or the king himself, but by fate alone. The guilty might walk free, the innocent might be destroyed. And yet the system had a certain logic, a savage, perfect logic. The crowd always came, always watched, always held their breath. Now, this king had a daughter. She was as passionate and bold as her father. She had his fire in her eyes and his iron will in her spirit. She loved deeply and fiercely as her father loved all things, completely, without apology. And she loved a young man of the court. He was low-born, certainly, not of noble blood, but he was brave, handsome, and devoted to the princess. They met secretly, many times, in the palace gardens and in quiet corners of the court. Their meetings were tender and dangerous, for the king's eye was sharp and his patience was short when it came to matters of station and rank. Inevitably, the king discovered the relationship. He was furious. The young man was thrown into prison, and a date was set for his trial in the arena. This was, in the king's mind, perfectly just. Was the man guilty of presuming too much? Let fate decide. Let the doors speak for him. The day of the trial arrived. The arena was packed. Every seat was filled, every gallery overflowing. The crowd buzzed with excitement and tension. They loved the arena. They loved the power of the not knowing. On her golden throne above the arena floor, the princess sat rigid and pale. She had spent weeks in anguish. She had used every resource available to her, her intelligence, her influence, her wealth, to discover a secret that was carefully guarded. And she had succeeded. She knew which door hid the tiger and which door hid the lady. But she had learned something else as well, something that twisted in her heart like a knife. The lady behind the second door was someone she recognized, a young woman of the court, beautiful, gracious, beloved by many. And more than once, the princess had seen this young woman glance at her lover with bright, admiring eyes. Had he glanced back? The princess was not sure, but she thought perhaps he had. The princess possessed the semi-barbaric soul of her father. She could love fiercely, and she could hate just as fiercely. As she sat in the arena, her mind burned with two images: the tiger tearing apart the man she loved, and that young woman standing beside him at their wedding, smiling, taking his hand. Which was worse? Which could she bear? The young man walked out onto the arena floor. He was calm. He looked around the packed galleries without fear, and then he looked up, directly at the princess. There was no question in his eyes, only a certainty. He knew she had discovered the secret. She was the only person in the world who had the means and the will to find it out. He had absolute faith in her love. He looked at her, and with a small, quick movement, almost imperceptible, she raised her right hand and gestured, slightly but clearly, to the right-hand door. No one else saw it. No one else understood it. The young man did not hesitate. He turned to the right and walked to the right-hand door. He reached out and placed his hand on the iron latch. He paused for only a moment. Then he pulled it open. Now the question is this: which came out of the open door, the lady or the tiger? The more we think about it, the harder it becomes to answer. We must think about the character of the princess. She was warm-blooded and generous, yes. Her love for the young man was real and deep. She had suffered terribly through the weeks before the trial. The thought of him being destroyed by the tiger was a horror she could barely endure. But the thought of him opening that other door, of him walking out, turning to see that young woman, and then being married to her, right there, in front of everyone, in front of the princess herself, that thought was its own kind of horror, a living horror, a daily one. She had thought about it day after day. She had sat with both visions. She had felt the weight of them both pressing down on her. This young woman, her rival. The princess had seen her at court, had watched her, had measured her. She did not like her. She had dreamed more than once of the tiger. And yet she loved him. So which came out of the open door? The tiger, hot and hungry, bursting from the darkness, or the lady, calm and dressed in flowers, stepping forward with a smile? There are those who know the heart of a woman who possesses her father's blood. There are those who understand what jealousy does to love and what love does to jealousy. The question has been asked before, and it has never been answered. It is not for me to answer it. Which would you choose, the lady or the tiger?